If I were to ask you, what is the central mystery of the Christian faith, what would be your answer? Perhaps you would say the incarnation, God becoming a man, the Creator becoming part of his own creation. Or maybe the Eucharist, bread and wine becoming the flesh and blood of Christ. Or how about the mystery of the Son of God's death on the cross? Or the mystery of his sacrifice redeeming all of creation? Truly, each one of these is a great mystery. But the greatest of them all is one so significant as to be the very center of Christian faith and of Christian life. It is the mystery of the most holy Trinity. One God in three persons. This is the one source of all the other mysteries of our faith, and the most fundamental and essential teaching of Christianity. Because you see, the incarnation, the Eucharist, the cross, and the redemption are all mysteries of what God does. But the mystery of the Holy Trinity is about who God is. Since we have returned to the season of ordinary time, our readings today once again begin with the Old Testament rather than the Acts of the Apostles. But in the Old Testament, the Holy Trinity is not clearly and fully revealed to us. It just hints at what will be revealed in the New Testament. For example, in the first reading from the book of Deuteronomy, it is about the revelation of monotheism, that there is only one God. Here Moses speaks to the children of the Israelites who he led out of Egypt after centuries of their being exposed to and absorbing the Egyptian worship of a multitude of gods. Moses reminds the Israelites that the Lord is God in heaven above and earth beneath. There is no other. So Moses tells the second generation of the Exodus that there is one and only one God. In other places in the Old Testament, it implies that there is, in fact, a plurality in the one and only one God. For example, in the book of Genesis' story of creation, God says, "Let us make man in our image." Now, there is only one God speaking, but the us implies more than one divine person. You follow? Another example is the Hebrew word for God, Elohim. Throughout the Old Testament, this word is used in the singular, indicating only one, but the word itself is plural, indicating more than one. And the words of Christ in the New Testament do something similar. Jesus often speaks of God being his Father in heaven, right? And this implies that he is the Son of God, the Father. And Jesus says that he and the Father are one, that they are the same, but also somehow different. Jesus also speaks about giving his Holy Spirit to the disciples, right? Indicating that the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ are one. Which means that if the Spirit is one with Christ and Christ is one with the Father, then it necessarily follows that Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit and God the Father are one God, and yet somehow three divine persons. There is only one place in the Bible where Jesus explicitly states the mystery of the Holy Trinity. And we heard it today in the reading from the end of St. Matthew's Gospel. It takes place after the resurrection, when the risen Lord appears to the remaining apostles on a mountaintop, which in fact is where God often appears to people in the Bible, isn't it? And the apostles recognize this moment as a real encounter with God, an actual theophany. And they do this by falling on the ground, falling on their faces before Jesus and worshiping him. Jesus says to them, I am with you always, even unto the ending of the age, which harkens back to the beginning of St. Matthew's Gospel, where the archangel says to Mary that the child she will conceive through the Holy Spirit will be called Emmanuel, a name which means God with us. And then Jesus commissions the apostles to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Now, did you notice that Jesus says in the name and not in the names? So there is only one name because there is only one God. But he also says that the one God is three divine persons: God the Father, and God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, one God in three persons. And so now we all perfectly understand the mystery of the Holy Trinity, right? Well, of course not. Over the centuries, this great and truly incomprehensible mystery has been depicted and described in an amazing variety of ways. Some ways are better than other ways. And perhaps one of the best ways of describing it involves something you and me do every day. Consider what happens when you think about yourself. In the process of thinking about yourself, three things are present. First, the you who is doing the thinking, right? Second, the you are thinking about. And third, the thought itself. You follow? Each one of these has its own distinct characteristics, and so each one is recognizably different than the other two. Yet, all three of them are united in one process, united in one human being, you. Now, if you look at God the Father as the one thinking, and God the Son as the one being thought about, and God the Holy Spirit as the thought itself, and all three united in one process, one divine being, God, then you've come a little bit closer to the reality of one God in three persons. St. Augustine famously took this particular way of looking at the Holy Trinity, and he tweaked it just a little bit to reflect the way St. John describes God in his first epistle, where he says that God is love. So now, using the example I just gave you, substitute love for thought. And look at God the Father as the one loving, and God the Son as the one being loved, and God the Holy Spirit as love itself flowing between them, and all three united in one eternal, limitless act of love. One eternal, limitless divine being, God. And think of this, love is not something passive, is it? It's not something that just sits there for us to admire. No, love is active, love is dynamic, love is reciprocal. And once ignited, the fire of love cannot be contained, can it? And so someone who is truly loved cannot help but love in return. This means that God, who is love, is more than just a supernatural thing called love. The one God is a veritable dance of love, a vortex of love, perfectly and passionately exchanged for all eternity between God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Spirit. And once ignited, the love cannot be contained, right? So God created everything in the universe to share in that exchange of love. And do you want to know the best part? You and I were created by God for one reason above all others, so that you and I can freely choose to be swept up after this life into the very midst of this irrepressible and immeasurable and unending maelstrom of love that is the most holy Trinity. God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Spirit, one God in three persons. God who is love.